Thank you all so much. It's good to be with you. As Russell said, my name is Jake, and I got to be honest with you guys. So a little while back, I was preaching, and Russell was in the kids ministry, and I think he was intentionally like riling them up as loud as possible while I was preaching to try to throw me off. And so the part that God's still working on in my heart took great joy in all that noise happening while he was up here. It felt like justice. I don't know, but this is your first time, and this is your experience of me. We're off to a great start. No, it's good to be with you. Like I said, my name is Jake. We're continuing this series at the Well. If you missed last week, no big deal. These don't really build on each other. Essentially, we're just looking at some different characters and instances that happen at a well. That's kind of how we roll around here. It's very self-explanatory. We call community groups. We call discipleship groups. There's no hidden messaging happening. It's just a series of instances that happen around a well that we wanted to dive into maybe what God was trying to teach us about. And so we're going to do that today. But before we jump in, I want to just kind of share a little bit with you maybe the character that we're going to look at today. So you might be familiar with these, you might not. I'm going to reveal some things about myself this morning just by my knowledge of these two movies. So when I was growing up, I was born in 1994, but I have an older brother who was born in 86, and so I try to still kind of claim to be like a 90s kid because even though I was not really coherent for most of it, I still experienced a lot of it through my brother or things like that. And so there are these two movies, and this was back when you might scroll through just the channels to try to find something to watch instead of just having a million apps available to you. But there are two movies that stand out from my childhood, and they're both what you would consider probably like 90s rom-com chick flicks, but they were on at my house on a regular basis. So the two movies are 10 Things I Hate About You and She's All That. And if you're familiar with these movies, I think we might be friends. But essentially what happens, 10 Things I Hate About You, they're both the same movie. I want to make that clear. It's basically the same thing. 10 Things I Hate About You is Heath Ledger's the main character. He gets paid by this guy who wants to date a girl, but the girl's dad will not allow this daughter to date anyone until the older daughter goes on a date with someone. So Heath Ledger gets paid to take the older daughter out so that this other guy can then date the younger daughter. And then in She's All That, it's Freddie Prinze Jr., and he is making a bet with one of his friends that he's like a shoo-in to be the prom king, and he thinks that he can make any girl in the school the prom queen. And so they make a bet that if he can pick the girl, and eventually at the end of the year, Freddie Prinze has to make her the prom queen somehow. And so both of these stories are about guys that have very questionable motives, that are schemers, that are manipulative, that are not great examples of how to get the girl at the end. And as the story plays out, you probably can already guess, like, there's ups and downs. They fall in love with each other. The girl finds out at the end about the scheming and manipulation and the bet and the bribe and all of that. And they're like, I don't want to be a part of this fake relationship. But the guy has already fallen in love with him, and he wins them back. And at the end, somehow, because, it wouldn't have sold tickets otherwise, the guy gets the girl. It's a happy ending, right? And the point of me sharing all of this is just to say that sometimes in life, or what we see around us, is that sometimes we get what we don't deserve. And sometimes, like, especially in movies where we try to lead to a happy ending, the guy gets the girl. This also is not a great, like, if we're trying to avoid the whole, like, the guy can be a jerk and that, like, actually gets the attention that he wants from the girl, this is not helping that kind of, like, pushback on that. But ultimately, in these stories, that's what we see. And so the beautiful thing about that is that we also get to experience that with God, that we get what we don't deserve in His grace and His forgiveness and His mercy. And that's really one of the themes of what we're going to see today. If there's nothing else that you take away from today's message, it's just that, regardless of your circumstances or how you feel like life is going, God sees you and loves you and cares about you. And there's this person who I think exemplifies this as a schemer and a manipulator himself with questionable motives all along, and yet God chooses to bless him greatly. And his name is Jacob, ironically. And so we're going to start our story here. If you have a Bible with you, you want to open up to Genesis 25 is where we're going to start. That's where the story kind of begins. We'll have it on the screen as well. But what's happened so far, last week we did talk about the story of Abraham's servant who goes and gets a wife for his son Isaac. Her name's Rebekah. And the servant is a great example of praying with faith and how we might approach a situation that's difficult or a challenge and seek God in that. And he comes out with this woman, Rebekah, to marry Isaac, his master's son. And the two of them have a hard time having children. They go 20 years without being able to produce a child. And so Isaac eventually prays to God, and God hears his prayer, and Rebekah becomes pregnant, and she's got 2 children in her womb. And we're about to read the story of the birth of Jacob and his brother Esau. But before we do that, I just want to kind of paint this picture, quickly give you this point that I think is important for us this morning, is that Jacob was blessed by God before he was even born. Jacob was blessed by God before he was even born. And we'll find out why that's important in a minute. So let's pick up the story in chapter 25, verse 22. It says, "The children struggled together within her, and she said, 'If it is thus, why is this happening to me?' So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, the older shall serve the younger.' And when her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy cloak, and so they called his name Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. Now, Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them." Now, I point out that Jacob was blessed before he was even born here because God is making the case that the younger son, the younger one that's going to come out, is actually going to be the favored one, or he's going to receive a greater blessing. He's actually going to be served by the older one. Now, you might be a younger sibling and go like, yeah, that's how it works. I'm the boss. I'm the cool one, right? But traditionally, at least in this culture, that's not how things worked. The older would always receive a greater inheritance, would be kind of thought of as continuing the family line. If you were inside of kind of the kingdom mindset, where the king died, the eldest son would be the one who would take the throne away. That's kind of just how the system worked. So God is making a very profound statement here by saying that the older will actually serve the younger. He's setting up, he's breaking kind of the traditional mindset of how the blessing or inheritance would be funneled down. And so the reason why, there's a number of reasons why that matters, but I want to highlight 2 of them today. And the first one is this, is that you were also created with a blessing in mind. That you and I were also created with a blessing in mind. And I'll make a case from an Old Testament and a New Testament passage. The first from the Old Testament is from the prophet Jeremiah, who writes this in the first chapter of his book. It says, "Now the word of the Lord came to me, saying, 'Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations.'" Now, that's a very specific calling that Jeremiah has received. That's not necessarily for us. Maybe you are a prophet to the nations. That'd be awesome. But this is a very specific thing that he's saying to Jeremiah. The reason why I use that is because I think it highlights the fact that from the beginning, God has created plans and ways of utilizing our lives to then bless the world. Like, we are not an accident. We weren't created just by happenstance or coincidence. Like, God knew you before you were born, and he has ideas and plans in mind for your life. In the New Testament, Paul is going to write this in Romans chapter 8. He says, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified. And those whom he justifies, he also glorified." Now, if you're inclined to get into theological debates, I am not here to make a predestination argument. That's not at all the point that I'm making. I know this passage typically gets brought up in those circles. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, blessings to you. Peace amongst your house, because you don't have to worry about that. The point that I want to make just by highlighting this verse is the idea that before we were even born, again, Paul is highlighting this idea that God knew us and that God wanted to have a plan and a purpose for our life, or he has an idea of calling us to something beyond just whatever we choose to make of our lives, that God has something in mind for us. God made you with a blessing in mind, not just to receive a blessing from him, but also then to be a blessing to those around you. And the fact that I believe that you're even here today emphasizes that. You might not believe in God or any of this. You're maybe exploring or whatever, but the fact that you're here hearing a message about his goodness and grace and the opportunity to see people that are also exploring that, I think is a testament to the blessing that God wants to give to you, that wants to be a part of your life, to lead you into the best life possible for you. And so I think that we can see through this that there is apparent blessing in mind for you. And I think we actually kind of embody this a little bit too. You think about when parents are expecting a child, and what is the big craze? Like, I've got to get the nursery ready, right? Like, if you've ever experienced that, had a child yourself, or you know people that have had children, like there is a nesting phase, especially for the female typically, where it's like, we've got to get this place ready to have a child here. And there's, the crib and the changing table and the decorations and the walls got to be painted. And we got to get the right rocking chair. And we got to get, this and that. And everything has to be exactly right so that we can bring this child into like the most comfortable, safe place for them. And that's all just with the idea of blessing them with that space for them to thrive, right? And so we kind of get this as humans, but I think God even takes it a step further. Now, the second reason why I think Jacob's birth story is important, in addition to the fact that God blessed him before he was even born, is that on the flip side of that, Jacob, from birth, spends his entire life trying to earn a blessing for himself. So he's been blessed from before he was even born. God has chosen him to say, look, even though the system typically means that your brother is going to receive the greater blessing, I'm going to give you the greater blessing. His entire life he spends trying to earn it for himself. Now, if you've been walking with Jesus for a while, you've considered yourself for a Christian for a while, you probably can see the parallel, a little bit at least, to your own life, where there is a blessing available to you that God has said, I have forgiven you, redeemed you, shown you mercy, died for you on the cross, and yet there's still this pull internally to try to earn that forgiveness, earn that grace, earn God's mercy in your life. And this is what we see throughout Jacob's life, that he spends his entire life trying to earn it for himself. I'll give you 3 quick examples of this. So the first one, he is probably the one that you maybe are familiar with if you've been in church for a while. It's the idea of when he takes the blessing from his brother. So Esau is a hunter-gatherer. He's a manly man out in the field working. Jacob's more in the house, cooking, cleaning. He likes to spend more time with his mom. Not making any judgments on either of those, by the way, just to be clear. That's the characters that we're dealing with here. And so Esau comes in. He's hungry. He's tired. And the story is in Genesis 25, starting in verse 29. It says, once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted. That's why his name was Edom. And Jacob said, sell me your birthright now. Esau said, I am about to die. What use is a birthright to me? If I die, I can't take it anyway. So please, yeah, sure, go for it. And I almost imagine like Esau thinks that this is kind of a joke. Like he's like, yeah, sure, like that's kind of a heavy price to pay for a bowl of stew. But yeah, sure, whatever. I'm going to die anyway if I don't eat. And which seems like a kind of a joke. But Jacob is like, actually, I've got the contract and the pen right here for you to sign if you'd like to go ahead and make this deal. He says, swear to me now. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank, and thus Esau despised his birthright. That's the first example that we get of Jacob kind of being not just like grabbing onto his brother's heel, which, by the way he gets his name, Jacob, means heel grabber or deceiver. It's not just that he's like going along for the ride. He's not like, oh, I'm coming too. Like, it's more like, no, I'm trying to like actually go first. Like, I want to trip you up, pull you back so I can get in front of you and take first, even though the ironic thing that he doesn't realize, obviously, as a baby, is that God has actually said that the secondborn is going to be the blessed one again. But it paints the picture. I realize as a child we could argue, like, is he really doing this intentionally, or, but it paints the picture of who he is and what his character is going to be like for the rest of his life. And so we see this first example taking this through manipulation and scheming from his brother. Later on, his father wants to bless Esau. He wants to give him a separate blessing. And so he tells him, hey, would you go out to the field? Would you gather some food for me? I'd like to eat, and we'll have a meal together, and I will bless you. But his mom hears about this, and she cooks up a scheme with Jacob to deceive and gather and get this blessing as well. So they're going to make a separate meal for his father Isaac. They're going to cover him in like this hairy garment so that he looks and feels like his brothers. His dad is blind at this point, so he's just kind of feeling, Jacob's worried about his smooth skin. Esau's got hairy skin. So they cook up this whole plan to deceive their father. And again, he steals a blessing from his brother in this way by scheming, manipulating, feeling like he needs to earn it for himself as opposed to, the way that God had intended. And then last, there's a story actually more towards kind of the middle end of Jacob's life that actually takes place after the story that we'll highlight at the end, where Jacob is actually going to wrestle with this man who is seen as wrestling with God. It's kind of this symbolic moment where he wrestles with God. And that story is in Genesis 32. I'll quickly just kind of read a few verses over here. It says, "And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, 'Let me go, for the day has broken.' But Jacob said, 'I will not let you go unless you bless me.' And he said to him, 'What is your name?' And he said, 'Jacob.' So he said, 'Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed.'" So we see again this third example, and this is just a few of numerous ones throughout his life where he is so determined to fight and earn a blessing, when in reality from the beginning it was promised to him all along. Now, I would make this point as we consider what this means for us, is that at some point in your life you will wrestle with God also. At some point in your life, you will wrestle with God also. Whether that's from the most devout, like atheist, God doesn't exist, I don't believe in that, anything like that, there's still a moment of like, I have to like make that decision to, I spent my entire life walking with God. I have spent deep, intimate moments with him. There are times in my life that have been really great. There are times in my life that have been challenging. I believed in him all throughout. Throughout that story, there's going to be moments of wrestling with God. There's going to be moments of, it didn't happen the way I wanted it to. It didn't happen in the timing that I wanted it to. There was tragedy that happened. There was a brokenness or a doubt, or I was let down because humanity tends to let each other down. Like whatever it may be, we don't live perfect lives to where it's like, oh yeah, that all worked out. I always saw what God was doing. I always trusted 100%. I always knew that there was good for me. Like, that's just not really the human experience, right? And so at some point, we all wrestle with God. I think about when Russell was launching Mission City. So for those of you that might not know, Russell and I worked together at a different church but prior to launching Mission City almost 5 years ago now. And when he was first launched in that church, my wife and I, we came to a prayer meeting and left that prayer meeting feeling like God's just telling us we got to go with this church plant. And the difficult thing, or one of the difficult things about that was, well, this is the only career that I've known is working in a church. If we go be a part of a church plant, there's not going to be a salary there per se with me. There's going to be a different career path, or what does that mean for us long term, financially, all those things. And for months, what I would hear when I would pray about that, or when I would just kind of sit with God is, hey, I've got this. I'm going to provide for you, and specifically that there's going to be a friend, a family member, a relationship that's going to open a door for you to have a job, basically. But I'm freaking out. Like I need to provide for my family, and we've got to make this work. Like, how is this going to happen? And so even though I'm praying, and this is what I feel like God's telling me, it just felt like it was my duty, it was my job to make sure that I did my due diligence, did everything I could to try to find a job, whether it's scouring LinkedIn or Indeed, or going to every job posting that I could find, or applying to a bunch of different places. And time again, it didn't work out for whatever various reason. It was I didn't get a call, or the interview, no call back after the interview, or a couple times there were jobs that were actually sort of offered, but after the interview process. You ever had the moment where you kind of go through an entire interview process thinking the job is one thing, and then when it's actually offered to you, it's like not that job at all? And I was like, okay, that's not what I applied for. That's not what I was hoping for at all. And so just time and time again through these various different things, like it just nothing worked out. And yet like I'm up at midnight, like scrolling everything that I can find, feeling like I just have to find this. And throughout the whole time, like God's telling me, I've got this. I've got a friend, or I've got, there's going to be a door that opens. And sure enough, about a month before my end date had been set for the church that we were working at, a friend of mine reached out and was like, hey, I know you've been looking for a job. Just got a promotion, and the job that I'm leaving is fairly entry level, and I think you could do it, and I would be happy to recommend you and kind of get your foot in the door. And through that, it got accepted to the job. It was not just like a job, but actually like what I thought at the time was a new career path. It was going to work out, and it kind of checked every box that we needed. And ultimately, I had 1 week of PTO. I'll never forget this. I had 1 week of PTO left for my previous job, and the start date that they offered me was 1 week after my last day. So it was like literally not a single like break of money coming in or anything like that. It was just like, yes, okay, I get it. I have been working so hard to try to earn this, and the whole time, God, you just had this in mind that you were going to work this out. And I think about that story a lot of just like, I find myself many times wrestling with God, trying to earn for myself what he already has in store for me. I just need to wait and then receive it in the way and the timing that he has for me. And so I think ultimately one of the takeaways that I wanted to mention of this story is that I don't think it actually matters how we wrestle. Like we read the story of Jacob wrestling with God, and I don't think we should be taking pointers on like how he does it. There's no half Nelson kind of move here that we should be learning to wrestle well with God. It's more so, how long are you going to keep wrestling? How long is this going to go on? As you think about the man that he wrestles with, he's wrestling and wrestling and wrestling, and finally he just touches his hip and it goes out of socket. Like he had that in his back pocket the whole time, and he just is like, no, we're just going to keep wrestling here. And I think God allows us to do that too. Like he's got the ultimate plan in mind. He's got the end goal in mind, and we're wrestling and wrestling and wrestling. He's like, when are you going to give up? When are you just going to let me be me? And so I don't think that the ultimate outcome or the ultimate takeaway is how does Jacob wrestle, but how long are we going to keep wrestling? I think the sad part of Jacob's story is that he was promised this blessing from the beginning, but he continues to try to earn it. He continues to try to fight for it. His whole life is kind of dedicated to scheming and manipulating and trying to get it for himself, what God has already promised to him. And ultimately, there's this too, because I think that God has something better for us, but I think that there are also consequences to our striving. There's consequences to the trying to earn and everything. Like I mentioned before, kind of the late nights of trying to find a job. That's a small-ish consequence of just kind of living with stress and like. But in that season, it feels like a very big thing that you need to do that. And it's a consequence of not trusting in God, that I was an insomniac that couldn't sleep and was stressed out about what job I'm going to have the whole time. And Jacob's going to find himself in a season where his efforts are ultimately going to lead to a curse as well. But God still wants to bless him. And I think going back to what I was mentioning in the beginning of what I hope our takeaway is that no matter our efforts, no matter how hard it is, no matter what we try to do or where we maybe put our faith in ourselves over God at times or what life looks like, ultimately, God still sees you and cares about you and wants to bless you. So let's get into this last story, which is we finally made it to the well. It only took us like 25 minutes this morning, but we're here. We're at the well. So Jacob, after he gets the second blessing from his dad, his brother is so angry that he declares that he wants to kill Jacob. And so his mom finds out about that, and she's like, you got to get out of here. Your brother's coming to kill you. Like, go to my family's house. Go find yourself a wife, start over, get a new life, whatever. Like, get out of here. You're not marrying a woman from around here, I'll tell you that. That's very important to her. She says, I will die before my son marries a woman from around here. That's her words, not mine. But she sends him out to go to her family's place, which is about 500 miles away. And so the first kind of curse or the first letdown of Jacob is that although he has now schemed his way into receiving the greater inheritance from his dad and this blessing that his dad has promised him, he's now sent away penniless to go 500 miles to live away from home. And so that's the first thing that his schemes kind of get him. But he goes on this journey, and we'll pick it up in chapter 29 of Genesis here. It says, Then Jacob went on his journey, and he came to the land of the people of the east. And as he looked, he saw a well in the field.
And behold, 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it. For out of that well the flocks were watered. The stone on the well's mouth was large, and when all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. So Jacob said to them, "My brothers, where do you come from?" They said, "We are from Haran," which is where he is. They're saying, "We are from here. These are our sheep." This is a very awkward kind of conversation that they're having. I just want to paint that picture. He says, "Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor?" They said, "We know him." Again, very short, very weird kind of interaction here. "Is it well with him?" Jacob asked. They said, "It is well. And see, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep." He said, "Behold, it is still high day. It is not time for the livestock to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go pasture them." But they said, "We cannot until all the flocks are gathered together and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep." While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Now as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob came near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. So what do we find our guy doing again? He's told, hey, this is not the way we do things. You're coming in trying to tell us how we should raise our sheep, how we should water them, what time we should do it, and all that. They're like, that's not how we do things here. Everyone gathers together, and then we roll the stone. Probably a pretty heavy stone. We only want to do this one time, okay? Like, we don't need to keep going back and forth, rolling this thing back and forth away. And Jacob's like, no, I got this. Pretty girl's coming. I just want you to know I got this. Move away, and like steps in and does it his own way. This is who he is. And I just, again, we're getting the picture of the kind of character who Jacob is. And I also wonder, too, if maybe his mom ever told him about how she met, like, the servant that would take him to his dad. So we covered this last week, but the servant comes and he prays and says, God, if this woman that comes out tells me not just to water myself, but also my camels, then I'll know that's the one that you've sent for me, and I'm going to bring her home, and that'll be Isaac's wife. And now here we are with Jacob going to the well, and he's like, hey, you know what, my mom was, that kind of worked out for her to water the animals of the servant who came. Maybe I'll water these animals and I'll work something out here. By the way, if you ever see a story that happens around a well in the Old Testament, there's a marriage coming. It's just like, it's a weird coincidence. It's just, that's how it works. I don't know why, but that's how it works. And so Rachel goes and tells her father. Let's jump back into our story in verse 15. Then Laban, her father, said to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? Which is kind of a weird one to me. Like, oh, we're family. What should I pay you? We're family. How much do you think I owe you to stay here? Like, it's not just we're family, live with me. It's like, now I'll not just going to make you like kind of my slave. Like, I'll pay you something too. And so now Laban, we find out he has these 2 daughters. And the older one is Leah, and the younger one is Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. And Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to somebody else. So yeah, sure, stay with me. So Jacob stayed 7 years, and he served for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. And then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed. So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. Now, quick pause here. He says he gathered all the people of the place. The surrounding people were most likely, or at least some of the people that were invited, the shepherds that were around when Jacob came to the well and told them how they were supposed to water their flock. And so you would imagine, like, if there's an opportunity for them to kind of get back at him, or like there's not like a great, vibe between the 2 of them. And so this moment happens where they're invited to his wedding, and I would imagine, as we'll read, that they were maybe a part of this scheme that his father-in-law is going to cook up. So Laban gathers everybody. They have a big feast, lots of wine, lots of drinking, everyone's partying. And in the evening, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he consummated the marriage to Leah and not with Rachel. And in the morning, behold, it was Leah that was there. And Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Did I not serve you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me?" And Laban said, well, that's not the way we do things around here. You know, like kind of this going back to what the shepherds told him around the well. It's not really how things are done around here. If you had maybe thought about culture or customs or whatever, maybe if you would pause, we'd figure this out. But it's not done in our country that the younger would go before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also in return for another 7 years. And so there's a lot in this passage that we could dive into, probably do a whole sermon about it. But the focus that I want us to have is the idea of what Jacob's curse is from his scheming in this scenario. So he's been forced to leave his home. He's deceived into this forced labor. He's married to a woman that he didn't want to be married to. And he's betrayed now by the closest relative that he has living with him. It's a pretty tough place to be in. Right? The schemer has now been schemed. The deceiver has been deceived. There's that kind of saying that if you build a pit, you'll fall into it. Like that's what's happened here. And I think this is a cautionary tale a little bit of our efforts to earn a blessing in this life. Like, you familiar with Mo Money, Mo Problems? That's kind of a little bit of what's happening here. Or we sometimes find ourselves in positions where we're just never satisfied with success. We get the promotion, and 6 months later, we're like, okay, so what's the next rung on the ladder? What's the next thing that we can do? Or maybe it's a house or car. We're just continuously kind of keeping up with the Joneses a little bit. And eventually, we're feeling burnt out and isolated and lonely. And it's just like, man, I've been working so hard, and it never feels like I quite get satisfied for what I'm longing for. Sometimes life feels that way. And I think this the caution to us is to consider, are you trying to earn something that God wants to give you, but you've been trying to get it under your own strength? And I think part of it is not so much what we think is good or bad. So just historically, if we could just take a minute to get on the same page here. Historically, human beings, we do a really bad job of knowing what the difference of good and bad is, or in this case, blessing and curse. I think about from the very beginning in the garden, there's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? And what's the great irony of Adam and Eve eating of that tree is that it was the wrong thing to do. So like eating of that tree is literally like, you think about it as like giving them the wisdom to know what's right and wrong, and it's the wrong thing to do. And since we've kind of always had this struggle of like figuring out what the right and wrong things are in our lives, and ultimately, it's what God has in store for us. So the question is not how we define what is good and bad in our lives, but who we allow to define what is good and bad in our lives. Are we allowing God to be the one who says, yes, this is a blessing to you, this is not a blessing to you? Or will we define, yeah, that's what I want, and so therefore it is a blessing, and not so much allowing God to do that? But what I will say is that even though we all fall into this kind of perpetual cycle of, like I'm earning it or I'm defining for myself or whatever it is, like God still chooses to bless us. He keeps blessing. He keeps showing us grace and mercy and love regardless. For some reason, he keeps doing that. And as we wrap up, I want to invite the band to come up and just kind of make this clear. As I was thinking about this message and just kind of, sometimes you kind of prepare a message and it's more so like you're preaching to yourself than it is to like a stage of, people. And this has been one that it feels like all week just feels like God's been trying to teach me something as much as I've been trying to figure out what to share with you all. And, the ultimate reality is that no matter what I think of myself or what other people think of me or what I do, like I look at Jacob's life and I'm like, he is a scheming, manipulative, broken mess of a man in this moment of his life. And yet ultimately, God sees him as worthy of this great blessing. Like if we fast forward to Jacob, like through the end of Jacob's life, this is the man whose name is changed to Israel, who's going to have 12 sons who become the 12 tribes of Israel.
who we are going to follow the story of them for the rest of the Old Testament, who are going to be considered God's people, God's chosen line. That's going to be where David comes from, ultimately where Jesus comes from. Like, this is the seed of all of that rest of the narrative playing out. This is the guy. And I don't know about you, but I read his story and I'm like, not who I would have picked. And I think about maybe like that's how we sometimes even view ourselves. Not who I would have picked. Got it. You still love me? Or you choose to bless me? I don't know why. I don't really get it. I think I probably need to earn a little bit better. I don't deserve this. I need to do something to try to make myself worthy of what you have done for me on the cross or in my life. And yet he still chooses me. He still chooses you. There's a verse in Romans 5 that says, "But God showed his love for us, and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." The point of that for us this morning, I think, is that God chose you before you chose him. That there was a blessing for you before you had the opportunity to even try to choose it for yourself. That it's been waiting for you. That the opportunity to come into his presence, to receive his mercy and forgiveness has always been available to you. And it's not just a one-time deal, but that it's every day that you have the opportunity to come into his presence, to feel his love, to feel his grace, to know that he is with you, that he wants to bless you, that he wants to be with you. And that blessing might not look like how maybe the world tells you. It might not look like you have a ton of money in your bank account or the nicest house or the whatever. There's a blessing there for you and then to be used to bless others. The idea of Jacob being this blessed one wasn't just that he would hoard that blessing for himself, but that through him would be the one who would be a blessing to the world. And the whole idea of his 12 sons and the tribe of Israel and all that they were supposed to do was to be a blessing to the world. And they didn't deserve it either. It was unearned. It's undeserved, God's goodness and grace. And that's what's available to us today as well. Maybe you find yourself in this room feeling burnout and tired from trying to earn it every day. And I just want to welcome you into his presence, to rest, to believe that he's good, to believe that he has it already for you. It's just to trust and believe in him. I want to pray. I want to talk about how we can maybe respond to that. God, I ask you that we would come before you open-handed this morning to receive your goodness, to be reminded of how you choose us, that you choose to love us, that you choose to offer your grace and mercy to us every day, that we can find a place of rest in a world that just tires us out. God, your goodness does not depend on our own performance. It doesn't depend on who we've been. It doesn't depend on us earning it or deserving it. I pray that we'd find rest in you. I pray that we wouldn't look back on our lives and see so many signs of being like Jacob, where it's just, yeah, there was that all along. God, you were always available to me, but time and time again, I just had to earn it. I had to fight for it. I had to deserve it myself. I convinced myself that I needed it to do it myself. And surely I know that I can relate to that. And I pray that there would be more and more times where we just rest in you, that we find peace in you, that we give up the scheming and manipulating and trying to plan for everything to work out perfectly in our lives. That we just trust the one that had the plan from the beginning was good. And we lean into that. Father, we love you. It's in Jesus' name I pray.